I find a verse in Romans chapter 16 and verse 13 that I think can apply to everyone. There, Paul says, "Salute Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and his mother and mine." And if we look at the NIV version, it says of this mother of Rufus, "who has been a mother to me too." I like that. Mother to me too. And the Good News Bible says, "who has always treated me as a son." A great compliment to any woman, isn't it? Paul had many helpers, but this lady he singled out as something special. Mothers are something special, aren't they? And Paul says, this lady, this mother of Rufus and Alexander, she's like a mother to me. She's somebody special. She's been there in special times. She filled a need. Though we know nothing of Paul's family, he never mentions his family in any of his writings. We don't know what family he had. It's quite possible, maybe even probable, that he was disowned by his family when he became a Christian. That is not unusual. It wasn't unusual then, isn't unusual today among Jewish families. If the Orthodox Jews, if a child or a person becomes a member of the family, becomes a Christian, they'll often disown them. I understand they'll sometimes even have a kind of a mock funeral for them and say, well, that person is dead now. They're no longer here. Just because they became a Christian. Aren't we so privileged to have it so easy here to be Christians compared to some others? But I don't know if that happened to Paul, but I rather suspect it probably did. And he was probably feeling that pain of not having a family, missing his own mother. I don't know whether his own mother was still alive, whether she deserted him, or just what the situation was. But as he traveled about, he came across many people, some that helped in his ministry, some no doubt helped him privately. But this woman was a special help to him. And that's something anyone can be, isn't it? A person doesn't have to be an actual mother to be a mother to someone else. You know what I mean? And we've probably all known people like that. This woman supplied companionship to a lonely apostle. Can you imagine what it must have been like for Paul to be rambling from place to place? If you read the book of Acts, you know, some of his journeys, he was just on the go all the time, usually because they had a riot where he was and he was chased out to the next town. Said everywhere Paul went, he either had a revival or a riot, and usually both. And that was about the way as we read the book of Acts. And so he was on the move all the time, and that's a lonely life, isn't it? I think of some of these truck drivers on these long hauls. I would not want that life. I sympathize with them. It might be exciting the first few trips they make across the country and see different places and the adventure of it, but I think it would wear off pretty quickly. Being away from home for long stretches at a time, staying in different communities, always on the road going somewhere. It would be a lonely life. And I would imagine if they come across someone that they know where they can stay, it must be a big boost to them. I remember when we moved from Goose Bay, Labrador to Wapella, Saskatchewan. Oh, that's a move and a half for you. And of course we had our things flowing out to Moncton and then trucked from there out. And it was late November when we moved. And come Christmas time, our truck still hadn't arrived. My wife did not enjoy that Christmas very much. But we got by on it. Fortunately, the house we were going to was partially furnished, at least. But when the fellow arrived a couple of days after Christmas with our things, he was excited to say that I was able to stay in Winnipeg for Christmas with friends. It was so nice to be with friends over Christmas. I thought, well, good for you, but it didn't cheer us up very much. But I've thought back afterwards and thought that really was a good thing, because he's traveling across. He could have been some other city where he didn't know anybody and just alone in a motel or something over Christmas. But he was able to be with family, some relatives of his. And that makes a big difference, doesn't it? And I think that must have been the way with Paul as he traveled around about. Somehow he had come to know this lady, and she had made her home open to him, evidently, because he says he treated me just like a son. What a wonderful privilege that must have been. What a gift to Paul from that woman. See, gifts don't always come gift wrapped, do they? The best gifts come out of the heart of someone to us. She supplied this need to this apostle. And perhaps there is desperate situations that he was in. His life was in danger a lot of the time. Must have been some desperate situations where he just needed somebody to kind of mother him a bit, if I can use that word. Because mothers never desert, do they? Yeah? You might have a child that's gone astray, and maybe you don't know what to do with them, and maybe they've got a long way off, and you don't have much contact with them anymore. But mothers never desert them. And this mother evidently never deserted Paul, even more than she had her own family. We don't know anything about it. All we know is that it says here that she was the mother of Rufus, his mother. Rufus, we're not sure who Rufus was, but we do know that Simon of Cyrene, that was called to carry the cross of Jesus, had two sons, Alexander and Rufus, and it seems that they had become known in the church because when Mark speaks of him, he mentions that the father of Rufus and Alexander. Isn't it interesting sometimes as we go through life, we start off, with a name of children, then it comes after a while, we become the father or mother of such and such a child, They seem to take over and we step back. And that seemed to be the case there. Rufus and Alexander had got known enough that Simon of Cyrene just became known as their father. And so I tend to think, I'm speculating a bit, but I tend to think that this Rufus was probably the same one. So this lady was perhaps the husband of Simon of Cyrene and had quite a background there. But whatever it was, she was like a mother to Paul. This woman reached out beyond her own family. How often we see that done, isn't it? Some do it quite deliberately. Take in foster children. I think of Cynthia's parents that come sometimes and nearly always have at least one little girls with them most of the time, but every so often there's another one with them, they've taken in for a while, kind of mothered that child in their time of need when for some reason it had to be taken out of the family until they can get either back to the family or in a foster home or adopted or whatever. Mothering these children, helping them along in a desperate time. I don't know whether this woman had done that to others besides Paul and her own family, but I kind of think probably she had. Kind of think that Paul wasn't the only one that could speak of Rufus's mother as his mother and also mine, because she mothered, because she showed that love. And we can show love to those around about, whether we have family or not. I know sometimes people will say, well, my family's so far away. Well, if they're away and you feel lonely, find somebody else that needs a mother or a father. But since it's Mother's Day, something that you can just show some of that love to. And anybody can do that. Whether it's somebody that has a family or whether it's somebody who's never had a family or somebody who has lost a family or later on in life when the family's gone, we can still be a mother to somebody. This woman was. I think of the Big Brother and Big Sister organizations, what great work they do in trying to get people to sort of befriend a child and be a father or a mother to them. You don't replace the real ones, but you fill in that gap. And I don't know if any of you have done that, but it sounds to me like a real ministry to needy children that just need somebody to have that family atmosphere. A substitute mother or a substitute father. That's why I entitled this message, Substitute Mother. I preached on mothers and grandmothers and mother-in-laws. Should preach on that one again sometime. It's a good one. But today, substitute mothers. Somebody just kind of fills in the gap where it's needed to a lonely person like Paul. Some people with no children are mothers to many children. My mind often goes back to when I was in, they call it junior Sunday school. Would that be about 8, 10-year-olds, And it was, church I went to was departmentalized, and we had the junior department, and the lady who was supervisor of the junior department, a lady by the name of Mrs. Rose, never had a family of her own. I don't know why, but all the kids were hers, especially the boys. We were all her boys. I guess the girls too, I don't know, but I remember her so often referring to all her boys. And she just kind of was a mother to every boy in that Sunday school, and probably girls too. And the result was, I think it was a good part of that result, that there were a number of us from that ended up going into the ministry and other forms of work. And she followed each one and continued to be kind of a mother. And I remember getting letters periodically when I went into the ministry from Mrs. Rose, and appreciated it so much. I knew that she was praying for me. There came a time in my ministry that I felt that, how you can, if somebody's praying for you, you can feel it. And if they're not praying for you, you can feel it. And I just had that feeling that somewhere I wasn't getting the prayers before I used to. And a few weeks later, I got a letter from my mother saying that Mrs. Rose had passed away, and I knew what it was then. But being a mother to others, isn't it? Whether we have children or not, we can be a mother. It can fill that need. It can also help to solve the empty nest syndrome. We hear a lot about that. It's hard when the kids leave home, isn't it? And I don't know whether it's harder if you have a lot of children or if you have one. I remember when our son, we just had one son that's arrived, and when he went away to college, it was like the whole family left, just my wife and I. Now, I know some others, I was another pastor, his daughter went to college at the same time, but he had another daughter and a son at home. But they were quite upset that, their daughter went to college and it left such a hole in the home. One time he came over, actually made a point of coming over to call on us, wondering how we were coping, because he said, I miss my daughter away at college so much, and I was thinking of you, and Glenn's your only son, isn't he? He said, yeah, he is. So it's kind of like the whole family. But which is hardest, I don't know, but there is something about that and that empty nest syndrome that they talk about. Wasn't a good way to fill that nest with somebody else, Oh, that's never quite the same as their own children. But like this woman that Paul could say, she treated me just like her own son. Oh, if you're facing an empty nest syndrome, I know one family here might be wishing they did have an empty nest syndrome. I won't name. But if you are facing that, find somebody around that you can be a special mother to. Might be a neighbor. Might be somebody else, in the community. Some child, some young person. Well, it could even be an older person that needs it. Sometimes one of the problems with older people is maybe their family's all gone and they're feeling pretty lonely and they just need somebody to, I don't know whether you can say a mother to them because you're maybe younger than them, but to fill that spot, just as this lady did for Paul. Many people need a mother's love. There's nothing like it. We see it even among animals and birds sometimes. That close connection that some of them have. But oh, how much more as humans. There are lonely children and lonely adults. And this day and age in which we're living, where there's so many working parents, there's a lot of children that have to come home alone. What do they call them? Latchkey kids, I guess. And, that's a sad. I know we always did our best to be home when Glenn got home from school. Couldn't always make it, but we tried our best to do it. But some people, when they're working out, they don't. So you have a little more freedom sometimes in ministry than you do if you're working out with someone else. But it's so important. But sometimes those kids that come home alone might be nice just to have a neighbor that, of course, you'd have to clear it with the parents, They could say, well, have them come in, have a cookie at my place when they get home from school, They'd just be that substitute mother for them. And sometimes adults can be awfully lonely. There's probably people living in this community that are living alone and just need that companionship, That's where the coffee shops come in handy sometimes. They become a great meeting place. I think many of us, if we go to a coffee shop, we don't go for the coffee. Don't tell Tim Hortons that, but no, we don't go for the coffee. We go for the companionship, the visiting around about, usually. And ladies can supply a love that's lacking in many homes. It's sad there's so many homes that are lacking of love. And I'm not saying men can't, but ladies seem to have that special ability to show love, that mothering instinct that, as I say, is unfortunately lacking in many homes. And if you can supply that to some lonely child, some lonely adult, what a ministry that is. And of course it leads, the great thing about it is, it can lead to an opportunity to lead that person, that child or adult, to Christ. How many children have been led to Christ by a loving substitute parent or Sunday school teacher or whatever? I referred there a while ago to Mrs. Rose. How many coming through that Sunday school came to know and love Christ because of her? Some came from Christian homes, some didn't. But she had a powerful influence on them. And I might just tell, I shouldn't maybe take the time, but this is an interesting story that when I left the denomination that I'd grown up in, that she was in, and went to the Church of Nazarene, I thought, I wonder how I can tell Mrs. Rose about this. But I wrote her and told her, that I was going to Canadian Nazarene College and going to Church of Nazarene. She wrote back and said, well, that's a good church. When I was teaching Sunday school all those years, one of my neighbors belonged to the Church of Nazarene, and whenever they had Sunday school training sessions, they've always been strong in having Sunday school training sessions in the Church of Nazarene, is whenever they had it, she'd take me along, and I'd take in the sessions, and they were so helpful. So I was getting some Nazarene influence probably back there that I didn't even know about. Never even heard of the Church of Nazarene then. But so that's just an aside. But she was able to lead many to the Lord. And as we mother other children, we might be able to lead them to the Lord. Or that lonely person staying in a little apartment or home of their own downtown somewhere, lonely. If you can get to know them and kind of be a mother to them, you might be able to lead them to Jesus Christ, which is the greatest gift of all that you could give, isn't it? A lot of people need that love. They need the love of God, but it usually comes through mothers. Somebody made the statement, and it's not completely true, but they made the statement that God made mothers because he couldn't be everywhere. Well, God can be everywhere, but you know what they mean? What the person meant when they said that he uses them to work through. God is love, and he usually loves through people. And ladies have a special ability to be that love channel to others. Perhaps to be a substitute mother to some lonely person, young or old. I hope men are still listening, because what is said about mothers can also apply to being a father to others, substitute father. And I know my father died when I was a year old, and so I didn't have a father to kind of bring me up, but I knew several men. One man in the church had a group for children and for boys that he ran, and he was kind of a bit of a father figure to me. And I know some of the fathers of my buddies, friends that I visit. In fact, I think in some cases I got along better with the fathers than I did with the sons that were supposed to be my friends, But a few substitutes like that along the way were a great help. Is there a child or an adult to whom you are filling a need? Someday they may be able to say, as Paul did, you have been a mother to me too, as well as your own. Also, too, a mother to me. May that be true of many lives.